Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Matt Townsend Show. I am your host, Matt Townsend, your relationship coach, your guide on the side, doing what we can every day on this show to help you and your loved ones grow healthier, happier lives, healthier, happier relationships. Welcome to the program, everybody. Today, I think we've got a wonderful show for you. Today, we're talking about your kids. How, when we send them on their beautiful little way, how do we make sure that they are prepared to make the decisions they need to make? Right now, they're all going out there. It's funny, as we're broadcasting here from Brigham Young University, you see all the newbies on campus, all the new ones with their nice bikes and clean, nice clothes that mom and dad helped them pack. And then you see them making the decisions like turning in front of you, driving real slow. No, they get on campus, and now the big decisions come, right? Now they start having people, come up to them and see if they want a credit card. That's all they need to start doing is their big financial decisions they've got to make. Even deciding what school. I have a teenager right now that's trying to decide what school to go to, and he really feels it's important to go away. Very, very far away. And in my mind, honestly, I'm all for it. In fact, I'll drive you. I won't even drive you. I will put you on the bus and send you far away, except when he started to find out what tuition costs in out-of-state tuition. So that's a problem. All these big decisions, the schools they need to go to, the career they want to follow and pursue, their values, their mission, all of these decisions kind of start coming to a head as we send them out on their own sweet little way. And so on today's show, we are going to be bringing on the author of a book. Shawn Moon is the author of the book On Your Own, A Young Adult's Guide to Making Smart Decisions. We're going to be talking to him, giving you some tools, some ideas as parents for what are the things you need to make sure. The things that have to be accomplished, the tools, the guides that we should be instilling in our hearts and the minds of our children so as they go out and make these decisions, they have something to fall back on and hopefully make better decisions in their own lives. Not like we can control it forever, right? Because once they're gone, they may be gone. If not, they're coming back, and then they're going to just slowly wear you down with neediness. So our goal is to help you with that. Now, you know all the advice your parents gave you when you were a kid, right? All that brilliant advice. Do you remember about 10 years later when you realized that all their advice was right? Some of us are still trying to get there.
I remember as a kid, my dad would always talk about the satisfaction that comes along with hard work. My mom would say how much easier life is when you're organized and keep your room clean. I always just assumed that those were lies they made up to get me to do the things they didn't want to do, like mowing the lawn and cleaning the garage. But then it turns out there was some truth to it after all. I've had my moments of realization where I felt a kind of positive regret, and I think to myself, so that's what Dad was talking about.
I get up when I like, wear anything I like, don't keep up with the cool, I make up my own rules, don't have to eat my greens, or keep my bedroom extra tidy, 'cause nobody is around to tell me up.
In today's world, words like duty and obligation or responsibility, they really aren't part of the younger generation's lexicon. As people my age contemplate big decisions like school, work, or even marriage, they often seek out what is more fun than fulfilling. As I look at my parents' life, they're rarely out on a beach or a cruise or enjoying fine food at a fancy restaurant. My dad has worked the same job every day for over 30 years, and my mom spent the best years of her life worrying about us. Yet they are two of the happiest people I know. For all the mistakes of the previous generation, I think most of them pretty much got it right. And I think my generation would do well to let go of our sense of entitlement and spend more time asking what we can do for our society than what society is doing for us. So next time you talk to your parents, thank them for the lessons they taught you. Chances are they didn't even know you were watching.
Excellent advice, Thomas Brinton. That was our famous Thomas Brinton, that was his last offering on this show. And of course, the offering was very mature. and we love him to death. He's going to greater things. I think he's got gym class next week. No, Tom has these big internships. He's now got to go start making some money. So we appreciate Tom. We bid him farewell. He's not going to be far. Someday, I'm sure you'll see him in a band, probably on the lower, the dark side of town, where people get mugged, and he'll be playing in that band daily. So appreciate you, Tom. It really is interesting that, remember the moment when you realize that your parents aren't as far crazy and off as you thought they were. Do you remember when you just thought they were nuts, and then all of a sudden they start to make sense? So we're going to be giving you some tools, some ideas, so that your children maybe don't think you're so crazy with all of this wisdom that you've been giving them. We're going to be talking to the author, Shawn Moon, of the book On Your Own. He's going to give us tips and ideas. Basically, it's a guide for all of these young adults that are leaving, going away to college, and starting their own lives. Some tools for them, some things that maybe you can go home and talk to them about. We'll be coming back with Shawn, and we've got a bunch of other great segments and other ideas that we're going to be dropping into your brain, trying to give you the tools you need to make life a little bit easier. Remember, it's not all bad, right? Life is great. We'll be back after this break right here on the Matt Townsend Show on Sirius XM 143 BYU Radio. Welcome back, everybody, to the Matt Townsend Show. Now, we're talking today about as we send our children on their way, right? We want to make sure that we've done a good job as parents, that they have a chance to succeed. And if you think about it, as we're sending them on their way, how we can send them out into the world is very much dependent on what we've done with them for the last few years, right? So think about it as a parent. Have you been a parent that empowers your children, that helps them become more independent, or have you been one that maybe, makes them a little more clingy? And when we try to teach our kids to make good decisions, we're hoping to help them obviously avoid the negative consequences the years down the road, right? But there's one rite of passage that has immediate consequences.
Me having to teach my daughter, I'm not sure if I'll be able to do that. I don't know.
I try not to think about it, actually. I don't even want to think about it because as much as I trust my daughter and think she's a pretty responsible person, I just picture her doing stupid stuff.
Being able to grab the steering wheel, I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing.
Well, I now know why they charge you extra to insure 16-year-old young men who are driving.
We've got 3 teenage boys, and I am an uptight driver. I have unrealistic expectations of my fellow drivers. Why? Because there's so much at stake. I worked with my first boy, and it wasn't pretty. As the result, I don't think I was really given the chance to teach my second or third boy the opportunity to learn the Mark Waite style of correct driving principles.
Kids think they know it, and they start doing it on their own, and then they realize, oops, I don't know everything.
And we'd keep saying, he'd say, Dad, I'm fine. I'm keeping the speed limit. I want to be. And we said, no, we're trying to exit. You have to be in the right lane to do that. And I don't know why it took so long to get that through his head, but by the time we got home, we shook our heads and said, never again. I
think that she'll actually listen to me, really. I mean, I don't worry about her as much as I would some other teenagers I've met. She does listen pretty well, but still.
Oh, it's way easier for somebody else to teach, and I can see why there are driving schools with professionals who I assume are very patient individuals, but they have a brake on their side of the car, right? I didn't have a brake on my side of the car, and it makes all the difference in the world.
Oh, I think absolutely so. He's driven with older brother, older sister, and I think that was a way more congenial relationship.
In certain situations, I think it is, they'll believe somebody else more than they'll believe their parents because they think that mom and dad are trying to protect them too much.
I think that yelling is usually my modus operandi in trying to distill and instill wisdom in my children. It is true that a teenager hears so much advice from a loving parent that they learn quickly to tune it out and to stop listening. And that's why we have. That's why it takes a community. That's why it takes a village to raise a child, because children might be more likely to listen.
Oh, yeah. As soon as we got out of the car, we were saying, this is sort of like how at your age you feel like you know everything, but it might be wise to consider what older people have to say. They might have learned something in all those decades of experience.
I've seen the look on my children's face when they actually hear something that my wife and I have tried to teach them, and then a teacher or a friend of the family or somebody else outside of the family says the exact same thing, and they realize, wait a minute, Mom and Dad were right.
Mom and Dad are always right, aren't they? Come on. We know what we're talking about. But boy, if you've ever tried to teach your child to drive a car, you understand what fear is really like. And now we're then going to send them on their way, and not only are they going to be driving a car away to college, they're going to be driving their life. For many of them, the first time in their life, they're going to be underway. Hopefully, they're going to have a plan and a map and know how the car works, their life, and some way to make these decisions. And so we're bringing on an expert. Now, he'll hate to be called that, but Shawn Moon, father of 4, wonderful man, just a good friend of mine, has written a book called On Your Own, A Young Adult's Guide to Making Smart Decisions. Shawn, welcome to the program, my friend.
Thank you, Matt. Wonderful to be here.
Now, Shawn, you also, you're not coming from this, kind of, you're trying to teach your kids to be leaders, to lead their own lives, and you're coming from this, with a lot of executive experience. You've served as an executive vice president. You currently serve as an executive vice president of global sales and delivery at Franklin Covey, so you know leadership. Plus, you've got a great education, and you're just a well-liked guy. So what's the big deal?
Thank you, Matt. It is interesting as you think about. I loved, by the way, the sound bites that you shared at the beginning, and I think the metaphor of teaching your children how to be independent in the car is a pretty nice metaphor for what is required to teach your children to be independent and ultimately effectively interdependent in life.
Yeah.
Because when you're driving the car, you're not just independent. You've got to relate to all the other cars on the road. So that's a nice metaphor.
It really, and it's just as hard. I mean, it really is. It's deadly too. You know what I mean? If they don't do it right, it
can take you places fast, but it can also kill you.
That's right.
Yeah.
Love it. Tell me, as you just think about this, and as you wrote your book, you obviously thought, the kids needed some tools.
Yeah.
What was the motivation behind your book?
Well, there are a couple of things that were a real driver behind the book. The first was something that occurred many years ago, and not only from my own experience, but was really with a family member. As I watched this young person of great promise, and wonderful potential, but who didn't see it in himself, go off on his own, somewhat unprepared. And then I watched the struggles that he went through, and ultimately made some really terrific choices, and how he course-corrected when necessary, and how it really changed the trajectory of his entire life. I started to think, the seed was planted. Think about the impact and the leverage that these small decisions have at such a pivotal point in someone's life.
Oh, yeah.
We've talked about, you and I have talked about this, how this age group has been told forever, since they're old enough to understand, and even before, the marvelous potential and the great people they are, and the difference they're going to make, and they can do this.
The world is at your fingertips.
The world is at your fingertips, exactly.
Yeah.
And then that moment of choice comes, and it is so interesting, especially when you talk to 17-year-olds. 17-year-olds are, it's an interesting age group. 17 and a half, because all of a sudden the realities of their pending independence come hit them straight in the face.
Yeah.
And I find that's an age where people all of a sudden start to put some brakes on and say, wait a sec, I'm not sure I'm ready for this.
Right.
And then it comes. So that's the first thing. It was that experience with a family member, going through all of that experience. And the second is really in my professional career. My background is in leadership development and consulting, and I spend much of my time working with executives and organizations, public and private and not-for-profit and education, et cetera, on these leadership concepts.
Right.
And I had a personal paradigm shift when I started to take some of these same leadership concepts that we deal with very senior level executives and bring them down to high school age kids and even elementary age children. And I realized, you know what, they get it.
Yeah.
It hits the truth button for them, and they start to realize, they start to use the language, and they start to see results by aligning themselves with principles of leadership. And so both those things together really were the impetus behind, I need to write some of these things down, some of these experiences down, and some of the things that I'm learning. These kids, I say kids because we're talking about children, but these young adults,
right.
They bring a lot to the table, and they have intellectual horsepower that grasps these concepts.
It's interesting because as you sit, and I know some of your clients are like big companies or like military leaders.
Right.
And as you go and sit and you're teaching leadership to some admiral, and then you then go teach a 17-year-old the exact same principle, it must be very empowering to think when you can see a 17-year-old grasp that idea and start integrating it into their life.
I just spoke recently at a conference that was mostly 17-year-olds, some 15, 16-year-olds as well. And I had, the day with them to talk about these leadership concepts, and they were required to write a letter. So each one of them wrote me a letter to talk about what they had internalized. It was marvelous. Now the language of the letter was written in the language of the 15-year-old or the 17-year-old. But the commitments they were making, their application to their life was really as significant as it is when I'm dealing with, an admiral or a general.
Oh, that's wonderful. And I mean, it just unleashes the power, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. It does. You do feel empowered because you see them feel empowered.
Well, and how horrible nowadays when it's so expensive to go to college anyway, it's so hard to find a job anyway, it's so easy to get into debt, to not go in with a fairly clear vision is going to put you so far behind.
Right. And that vision, I think, is everything. One of the key things that you're talking about on your show today is tools for parents. And honestly, Matt, I think that this concept of vision is one of the things that is most significant. On the sound bites that you shared a few minutes ago, one of the dads with some angst was talking about, I talk and talk and they don't listen and they don't listen.
Right.
My experience is they do. My experience with my own kids is that there are moments where I think, wow, is any of this getting through their thick skull?
Right.
And then I've now had the chance to see two of them go through the whole teenagerhood where there were times I just thought I was speaking to a blank wall. And they get to the other side of that, and I realized that many of the things that I was talking about and trying to teach and trying to show by example, and not always doing a great job there, because we all make mistakes.
Sure.
But it got through.
They
and
were
they
listening.
would start to teach me. They were listening. That would be one thing I would just, say to the listening audience that, what, just because you don't think they're listening and just because they're giving you exactly zero signals that they're listening doesn't mean they're not listening.
Yeah, so keep saying it.
Keep saying it.
And it's interesting, too, because even if they weren't listening per se, but they were just storing ideas,
right?
They're all going to come back. And, as the way kind of life rotates back on you, eventually, as it circles back, you're going to get hit again and again. And then you felt it. You have those moments where all of a sudden your parents' voice just echoes in your head, and it gives you chills.
Yeah.
And then you're actually saying the same
to
thing.
you.
Yes, isn't that scary?
That is.
That's great, though, actually. So vision's a key. And maybe the kids just today, I think some of this is that things are moving so fast and they're so distracted, and we're so distracted as parents, and the economy and debt and all this technology. I wonder if are we sitting down enough as parents to help them create that vision? There's so many kids that just don't have a clue who they are or what they should be.
Yeah, probably not. And it does take some concerted time. And I would say that if us as parents haven't taken time ourselves to sit down and reflect deeply on our priorities, on what really is important, then it's difficult for us to think that our kids are going to do that.
Right.
So that's an important step. You know, the old quote that we've all heard so much, that no one on their deathbed wishes they'd spent more time at the office.
Right.
And
well,
yet
Nixon did, right?
Yeah, and we all get so consumed in the daily grind that it's hard to take a little bit of time to step back and view the big perspective. But if we can do that, then it allows us, I think, to help us better do that with our kids.
As you think about the vision there, Shawn, and kind of preparing for this, we're going to take a break in a minute, but when we come back, I really want to talk about one of the key things, I think, for our kids is to have some sense of maybe their talents, their gifts, their purpose, and then be able to kind of segue some of this into a job.
Right.
But I guess preceding the job, they also, it seems like, would need some kind of moral root. They need to have some identity of who they are, I guess, morally, their values, their principles. Is that part of the vision then?
That is part of the vision, most definitely.
How do you, just quickly, in about a minute, what's a way right now that parents could open up the dialogue and start talking about that vision? That spiritual side.
I love the idea that Dr. Stephen R. Covey shared. It defined leadership as seeing someone's worth and potential so clearly they begin to see it in themselves. And I think that same statement could be said about parenthood. That parenthood is seeing someone's worth and potential so clearly that they begin to see it in themselves, seeing another's worth and potential, seeing your kid's worth and potential, that you have that vision for your child. And one of the foundations to this is that sense of who they are, their sense of purpose, their sense of spiritual well-being, and being open with them and talking about it. There are several things that a parent can do, and that the child could do to build that foundation.
Like, because honestly, I think if more kids had some feedback coming from their parents about what they, who they are, what they see their talents are. I mean, like at this stage in my life, I kind of have learned more and more about what my talents are, and I see that I can actually see my children's talents perhaps better than they even can.
Right.
So I guess part of that is just helping them point that out. When we come back, one of the things I do want you to get into is some exercises. What are some exercises they can also use to kind of connect into that vision?
Terrific.
And so we'll come back. We're talking to author Shawn Moon. Shawn is a great man, excellent, and just an incredible human being, wonderful father, leader extraordinaire, wrote the book On Your Own, A Young Adult's Guide to Making Smart Decisions. We'll be back with him in more tools to help you guide your family to a healthier life. You're listening to The Matt Townsend Show right here on Sirius XM 143 BYU Radio. Welcome back, everybody, to The Matt Townsend Show. We are taking on this idea of helping your children make better decisions in their lives, smarter decisions. We're talking to the author Shawn Moon, the author of the book On Your Own. Shawn is a leadership consultant and executive in corporate America and has written the book. He also is a father of 4 and just a wonderful guy. Now, Shawn, welcome back to the program.
Thank you, Matt.
You're in Chicago right now, aren't you?
I am, yes.
How's the weather back there?
I went running this morning and ran through the campus of Northwestern University in a heavy downpour.
Did you?
Beautiful.
Oh, yeah, I don't love the rain, but that
was my favorite run of the summer.
Was it really? Northwestern, you can't beat it.
Yeah.
Now, Shawn, as we've been talking about it, some of the things in your book, one of the things that we really have to make sure the kids have is choice. They understand that they're an agent in their own life. They're a change agent.
Right.
And then another is vision. And before we took the break, you were talking about the importance of this vision. How do we help our kids start to catch a vision of what their life really is about?
You know, the idea of vision is so powerful, and perhaps there are a couple of conversations that you can engage your kids in, and if they're willing, even write some stuff down. I have found that as I've worked with teenagers in particular, teenagers and young adults, that they are willing to do this. You get them in the right circumstance, and they're willing to do this. And I try to engage them around a few very simple things that help them, get a sense of their potential and a sense of what they want to do and be. So one thing I'll have them do is I'll write on a sheet of paper just a line, just let it go as long as they want. And at the beginning line, that dot represents their birth. And then somewhere an inch or two past that, write where we are today. And then at the end of that line, write their death. But it gives them a sense to visually see, my life is a finite thing. I don't have forever. I have to start making choices because every choice has a consequence. So that's something that usually is a little bit of a sobering thing for kids to think, wow, I may not go on forever. I've got to do something with this thing that I've got. And then the second exercise I'll take them through is very reflective, and it's for them to think about people in their lives that have had, an impact. I love this quote that was attributed, I think, to Charles Schultz, although I'm not sure he was the one that ultimately wrote it, but he talks about naming the 5 wealthiest people in the world, naming the 5 last Heisman Trophy winners, naming 10 people who've won the Nobel Prize, questions like that. None of us know the answer to those questions. But then get to questions like, name a few teachers who aided your journey. Well, we can all think of that.
Yeah.
Name 3 friends who helped you at a time of need. We can think of that. Name 5 people who've taught you something worthwhile. Things like that. They all of a sudden start to think introspectively. And then I'll ask them to think about influential leaders. When I do this with teenagers, it's almost always, not surprisingly, they almost always identify a parent or their parent.
Do they now? Oh, that's great.
They do. Yeah, they do. Now, if parents are doing it, they may not.
Yeah.
But when someone other than their parent does that, they bring that up. They'll talk about a teacher. They'll talk about a friend.
Well, at least they're not bringing up their parole officer, right? I mean,
yeah.
That would be bad. But it's a great sign that it's interesting. All of the people they're bringing up, though, are the people that they have personal relationships with.
That's right.
So the personal are really what end up mattering.
Yeah, at a personal level somehow. So when you identify that list of people, and then you ask them, what is it about those people that was significant? And they'll write down, they loved me, they saw potential in me, they did this for me. And they start to identify these traits. And so when we translate, that's what someone did for you. Now, what do you want to do for others? They start to see themselves in that leader role. They start to see themselves as someone who is capable of doing significant things. Then I engage them in a process where we talk about things that you want to have in this life. This can be material possessions. This can be immaterial possessions. It can be, but what are those? It could be traits, qualities of character. But what do you want to have? What do you want to do? Things you want. Do you want to travel? You want to get your PhD. You want to go to medical school or law school, or you want to go to nursing school. And what do you want to be? And these are qualities of character. And we've just talked about the leaders that have made a difference in your life.
Right.
What can you become? What type of person? And I see lots of pens and pencils moving rapidly in this section. People like to think about their material possessions, but beyond that, they realize, having a hot car is cool, and I'd like that someday, but I want to be a person like my dad.
Yeah,
I want to be someone like my mom.
This could even just be done via email, right? I mean, you could just slowly start sending out these questions to your kids while they're away at school, and just have them think about it for a week. And next time I call you, I'd love to hear some answers.
And Matt, I think that's an important point. I find that this process is best when it is done over a period of time.
Sure.
And not in a 30-minute, sit down and you're going to listen to me talk kind of session. And
you really want them enrolled in it. I mean, it's amazing, though. Like my daughter, who's out of the country, just visiting dangerous places.
That's all.
All of the sudden, that's all. But it's interesting. She knows how she wants to influence the world. And she just kind of did it on her own. And it's interesting, too, because she, even as she dates people, she runs them through this filter. Is this somebody that wants to serve the world that way? Is this somebody that wants to do that? And it ends up being a great tool, I guess, to help her make these decisions.
I had an interesting experience just a couple of weeks ago. I have a son who's the same age as your daughter, and he, like your daughter, is out of the country. And so he wrote me this letter, and he was talking about these concepts, and he was teasing himself. He said, "Gosh, Dad, I'm starting to sound just like you." You know, that's a good moment for a dad.
Yeah.
Because he was one of those for a period of time. I wonder, is anything ever getting through this kid's skull? But sure enough, drip by drip, it does.
It's working.
It is.
I love it. See, I think that's payday for a parent, don't you think?
Yeah.
Now, one of the keys, too, I guess, with all of this vision and these choices is that they really need to go get a job. They need to get a career. They need to figure out how they're going to make it on their own. Because if they don't, they're coming home, Shawn. They're coming back, and they're going to raise their family in your house.
Yeah.
So what are some tools? I know in your book you address kind of getting a job. What are some principles that you teach that might be good things for the parents to teach as their kids are out there trying to get a job, trying to find a career?
Well, first thing, get that basement apartment ready.
That's right. Get it ready.
I'm
the
kidding.
fallback.
I've identified, and there's I'm not the expert on this. I've identified 10 critical activities or behaviors that need to be addressed that I think you can as parents you can train around and at least engage in some constructive conversation around this. And when you're 16, you probably don't care much about it. But when you're 18 and you have to start thinking about what am I going to declare as my major, all of a sudden this becomes important. And these tools then transition from being something that mom or dad made me go through to something that becomes a bit of a lifeline.
Yeah, exactly.
And they include things like just what I've talked about, engaging in discussion about priorities, about vision, and about what you want to do and what you want to be. That's an important discussion. I know something that was critical in my own experience, and I found this to be the case as I've interviewed literally hundreds of young adults going through this same process. This idea of broadening your perspective. Just as you sent your daughter off into the scary world, every person needs to have an experience like that. My father did that with me when I was young. I was still just a child, but I had the opportunity at great sacrifice on his part to experience something outside the small, somewhat isolated valley that I grew up in. And we spent an extended period of time overseas, and I saw poverty, I saw corrupt government, I saw police brutality, I saw wonderful people that lived a life very, very different from mine, and I started to develop a sense of the world and a sense of the goodness and a sense of the challenge that is out there. And that did inform what I wanted to study and what I wanted to become.
That's interesting because that seems like too where a lot of parents would be afraid is we don't want it to go too. We want them to expand their horizon, but we don't want it to be the world horizon.
It is hard. And Matt, think about the experience with your own daughter now that she's
in Israel.
And how difficult that is as a parent to be willing to cut the apron strings a little bit and let her go experience that.
But just what her letters already are they're mind-boggling, what she's learning.
Yeah, the growth that occurs and the clarity of thinking that occurs in an experience like that is profound.
It's like, I guess what we do is we expand, and then they'll kind of naturally probably retract back to a different level, but hopefully more expanded, more open, having seen the world. So broadening perspectives is a huge one. What do you think? One of the things I find, I have a lot of people that come up to me, and a lot of people want to do what I do. They say they want to do what I do. They want they want to go speak and travel and all these things and have shows. But I noticed that some of them aren't willing to pay the piper.
That's true.
Have you noticed that?
That is true. And I had a conversation recently with a young adult who was considering dropping out of school because of a job opportunity. And I pled with him, do not do that. You have to be willing to pay the price.
Yeah.
And that's one of the key principles. One of my favorite business books is written by a fellow named Jim Collins, who wrote several books, including Built to Last, and Good to Great. And in Good to Great, he talks about his friend Dave Scott, who's won the Ironman, Hawaiian Ironman, Kona Ironman 6 times.
Wow.
And he talks about, he goes through the training that Dave engages every day, and 75-mile bike ride, then swim 20,000 meters, then run 17 miles on an average day the entire year. And one of the things that Dave does in his morning routine is he's eating his prescribed breakfast. He takes his cottage cheese and he rinses it. I thought, what? He's rinsing his cottage cheese because he wants to make sure that he pays the price in every single detail. He doesn't want any detail not addressed. And
I put chocolate sauce on my cottage cheese. That is crazy. I mean, see, but think of that, and then hey, I want to be just like that guy. No, you don't. You won't.
The metaphor of rinsing, being willing to rinse your cottage cheese.
Do you
I've
have
talked
that
about
character?
That with my kids.
I love that. That's enormous. So pay the price. They've got to learn to pay the price. It may have just been too easy, or maybe as parents sometimes we make it look too easy, but there's something about being willing to do it. What are some other keys for them to go get a job that you see that are critical?
I think it's okay, in addition to being willing to pay the price, which sometimes means going through hard classes or enduring jobs that you don't like. That's part of paying the price, is to then pursue that which you're passionate about. Robert Frost talks about the combining your avocation, what you love to do, with your vocation, what you do for work. And when you can combine those things, that's critical. As a teenager, I flipped burgers and scooped ice cream and watered plants at a nursery and mowed lawns and, all the stuff that teenagers do to earn money. And I realized that I didn't want to do that for the rest of my life. But if I hadn't had that experience, I'm not sure I would have appreciated, the price that I did pay.
So, that's interesting because I guess that's every piece of that was to broaden the perspective as well. You had the perspective, then you put in the energy to make it work. How do you get your kids to maybe select and make better decisions? How do you get them to actually decide between one option or another? I mean, these kids getting internships, they've got 2 really good options. How do they decide which one's the go-ahead, which one's not?
Well, they need to explore their values. They need to explore what they really want to do. Then they need to spend time talking with people. I've found that if you can, and I do lots of these kinds of interviews with young adults, and I send young adults to talk to a bunch of different people. I have a good friend who his whole life he wanted to be an attorney. And then when he did some interviews and did a little schooling, he realized, no, I really don't want to do that. I discovered.
That's crazy.
But he had to, learn from some experts, do an internship, talk to someone who is an attorney or is a physician, and see what their life is like. I interviewed one CEO, and I said, how do you make decisions? You're a CEO. You're not 21 years old, so you've kind of figured some things out. And he was very helpful. He spelled out some of the things that he goes through, and he wants to make a good living, but that was not the top of his list. He realized for him, he needed to do stuff that rung his bell, that he was passionate about. He needed to do stuff that engaged him with smart people, so he knew that working with other people was something that was important to him.
Love it.
I know one physician I interviewed, he realized he didn't really like working with people, so he chose a medical field that really allowed him to use his science and his studies, but didn't require him to interact with people very often.
Oh, okay.
Some of those things you don't learn until you get into.
Yeah, see, totally. And then you're so glad you learned. Because what if you had gone to med school? What if you had gone all the way into the program, then you realize you hate blood?
Well, and I'm telling you, Matt, I see this a lot.
Yeah.
I know you do as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
You encounter people who they're climbing the proverbial ladder of success, and they go rung after rung after rung, and all the blood, sweat, and tears that goes into that experience, and they get to the top of the ladder only to realize that it's leaning against the wrong wall, and they're not where they wanted to be.
Right. And it doesn't seem like this is a time or an age where you can afford decision. You can't make those mistakes.
Yeah.
You can. I guess you can recover, but it's just more time. Hey, Shawn, as we wrap up, give us one more. What's the number one thing? If we as parents could help our children do one thing, what would that one thing be, and then what challenge would you leave us with?
What's the one thing they could do? I would suggest that going through the process of creating a personal mission statement is the one thing. It's a difficult process. It's something that requires a bunch of time and a lot of introspection, and you're not going to get it exactly right the first time. But if they're willing to go through that will begin to clarify. And instead of being an event, it will become a bit of a process that may take them a few years, but it starts to get them thinking about what really is important. And this doesn't just apply to work. It applies to, who am I as a person? What do I stand for? What do I believe? What are my values? What is my sense of spirituality? Then it'll extend to, now what do I want to study, and what kinds of contributions do I want to make in the world? And then it becomes to, what sort of person do I want to be, and what legacy do I want to leave as I begin my own family? What kind of mother or father do I want to be? So this process of starting, your personal constitution, there are a number of activities and things that you could do, but just starting the conversation is critical. It will be less meaningful when they're 15, and more meaningful when they're 18, and a lot more meaningful when they're 21.
And, past the point of hope when you're 70.
No, actually.
Actually, there is still hope, isn't
there? There is still hope.
It doesn't matter when you find the vision, just as long as you catch it.
That's right.
Shawn Moon, so appreciate you, buddy. Good work. If people want to get a hold of your book on your own, they can find it at Amazon.com.
Amazon.com, or go to ShawnDMoon.com.
ShawnDMoon.com. Shawn, appreciate you, brother.
Thank you very much.
Take care, my friend.
Good to talk with you, Matt. Bye-bye.
Thank you. And great stuff. Parents, we can do this. We can help our kids catch their vision. Come back after this break. We'll give you a few more tools, and we'll wrap it up right here on the Matt Townsend Show on Sirius XM 143 BYU Radio. Welcome back, everybody, to the Matt Townsend Show. We've been talking about how to help your children make smart decisions. Just talked to the author, Shawn Moon, about, choice and change and vision, and helping your kids just catch a vision of who they are and what they have to offer this world. Now, again, it might seem like sometimes we're just trying to push our kids too quickly to move on, right? So do you want your kids to hurry up and grow up? Well, Bryce, one of our producers, has some ideas that might give you an idea of what to do.
Look, I don't want you to take this the wrong way, but I'm about to rant. This is the Bryce is Right. Kids these days, we have it so easy, right? Well, for some, yeah, that's absolutely true. On more than one occasion, I have been accused of thinking too much, which is a totally bogus accusation. I'm pretty sure a lot of property damage and hospital visits could be avoided if one or more people took a step back and thought for just 3 extra seconds about what they plan on doing. But I weigh and analyze, and I pro and con, and I go over my choices again and again to figure out if it's worth it. And if I'm not sure about something, I'm not going to do it. So then what's my criteria? Well, it's more complicated than just risk versus return. That's just gambling, and gambling is dumb. Let me describe it to you this way. I often find myself jumping from 10 feet in the air onto things. Now, at 10 feet, I could easily hurt myself, right? So why do I do it? Because there is a trampoline underneath me that I didn't tell you about until right now. Regardless of the fact that most kids can trace at least one hospital visit to an unfortunate encounter with a trampoline, I'm not worried about how high I can jump. It's a very low-risk situation. But you know what else? It's also not any fun after a few minutes. No risk, and there's no excitement or growth. So why do kids these days have things so easy? It's because they have too many trampolines to bounce off of. And it's not just you parents. There's many other trampoline providers out there. And as with all things, some trampolines are very useful, and others we could definitely do without. But we're going to give you parents some attention for a second. Because even though it may be hard to fail, it can sometimes be really hard to watch someone crash and burn, especially when you could have easily prevented it. So then what can you do? Well, here's a little inspiration that comes from an unlikely source. It's from games. One of the most frustrating aspects of a video game's development is tuning the difficulty. Too easy, the player's bored. Too hard, the player is frustrated and angry. After 40 plus years of constant trial and error, someone along the way came up with the idea of a checkpoint. Simple, really. Once you've made it so far, that spot is saved. Should things go awry at some point in the future, you go back to that last checkpoint. Nobody likes wasting their time, and doing the same thing over and over gets old fast. Then again, without the risk of failure, what's the point? The checkpoint mediates all this. It reduces the repetition, and in terms of wasted time, it's a lot better than going back to the very beginning. Think about it. We've been doing this with college for years. Imagine having to go straight through, and any failures mean you have to restart. Everyone would hate college, and also no one would really graduate because it would be too much to deal with. But with semesters, there's a built-in checkpoint every couple of months. So a life lined with trampolines won't promote growth. And trust me, even if you try and act like one isn't there, we kids know when it's there. And we also have no problem doing as we please because we know it'll be there to bounce us back. But if you were to put some space in between those trampolines, well, that changes the game altogether now, doesn't it? All right, I'm out. And remember, don't forget to be awesome.
Good work, Bryce. Tuning your pain. I like that. Is that what he said? Tuning your pain. To me, life is about learning to tune your pain. We all have troubles. We all have trials. And I think as we throw our kids out into the world, you know what? Maybe the key is that they have the ability to tune their pain. Now, listen to this. I just found this quote by a guy in Shawn Moon's book by a guy named Jenkins Lloyd Jones. Listen to this. Anyone who imagines bliss is normal is going to waste a lot of time running around shouting that he's been robbed. The fact is that most putts don't drop, most beef is tough, most children grow up to be just people, most successful marriages require a high degree of mutual toleration. Most jobs are more often dull than otherwise. Life is like an old-time rail journey, delays, sidetracks, smoke, dust, cinders, and jolts, interspersed only occasionally by beautiful vistas and thrilling bursts of speed. The trick is to thank the Lord for letting you have the ride. So as we wrap up the show, you know what? We got to learn to tune our pain. We got to get our children ready for the real world. Get out there. Some of the keys that we talked about, help them understand they have choice and agency in their life. Also help them understand the importance of a vision, of understanding who they are, their gifts, their talents. And one of the best ways to do that is to identify the people that have influenced their lives. And then start challenging them to project their life a little bit forward. What do you want it to be like at your funeral? What would you want people to say about you? And what are the things you want to have done and accomplished? And how would you like to change the world? Simple questions, right? I challenge you as we wrap up the show, get out there, start talking to your family, talk to your kids about these great ideas about hope and future. Remember that the world is not as bad and dark as it may seem. There's always hope. Start looking for the good folks. Keep listening to us on the Matt Townsend Show right here on Sirius XM 143 BYU Radio.